Hi, I'm Keith Fenwick. We're in the Lake District today, and this is the River Derwent, one of my favourite rivers to paint on. There's a lovely composition behind, but I'm going to turn this composition into an autumn scene. I feel like putting a bit of snow on the mountains and a few autumn colours in the trees for you. So let's start painting. These are the colours I'll be using on all the paintings in this series. Leave a space between your paints, so when your brush goes into one colour, you don't catch the other colour. Just common sense painting. I'm using the dark brown water-soluble crayon, and I've just roughed out a very simple drawing just to give me some guidelines of where to go and the height of the trees and the mountain and so on. The drawing's very simple, but everything's got to be in proportion and to scale. That's all drawing is. So the first thing we're going to do is to put in the sky. I want a bit of tissue in my hand to control the wetness of the paint, and we're going to do what's called a wet in wet sky. So I'm using my sky and texture brush, and I'm going to wet it with just a little bit of raw sienna. Not a lot. Now I never put the brush into the middle of the paint. I draw duck eggs touching the deposit of paint, and that determines the strength of pigment that I draw away. There we are. We'll just wet it like that. Now I don't need any more colour. We'll just come down with a bit of water like that. There's my underpainting. I don't stretch paper. I've never stretched paper for 25 years. I find it still goes wet and moves once I put paint on, so I don't see any point in stretching paper. This is 240-pound paper, so it's quite nice thick paper. So I'm going to put the skies in now, but I'm going to put my own sky in. We've got a cumulus clouds today, but I'm going to put my own sky in. The darker mountains on this side, so I want my darker clouds on this side to balance the painting. So I'm just brushing, look, very lightly, a bit of colour across here. I'm just using a mix of cold blue, just a cobalt blue with just a little bit of Payne's grey, just to get a darker colour. That's it, look. I don't want it too dark on this one. I'll put some colour across here like that. Just dab, 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 look. Little twitch here and there. Nice simple sky. I'm just going to touch a little bit of alizarin crimson in, but not too red, or we'll have all the shepherds out. Just want a little bit of colour just to darken and add a bit more colour on this side of the painting. That's it, that's what I want. Beautiful, look at that. A little bit across here, a little bit across there like that. And then we'll come round to the pointed brush. This is the size 16, and we'll just move that around a bit like that, soften the edge of that, and then we'll use a little tissue just to put in a few clouds. Look, now I'm just dabbing, I'm twisting, I'm not moving it like that. Look, I'm just touching the paint, soaking it up, putting a few little clouds in. Sky is very important to me. It can be 2/3 of your painting. Not in this case, but in most paintings it takes up quite a lot of the area. Now once you've stained it, you must turn it round, otherwise you get little spots on the paper and they'll laugh at you, and I'm very sensitive. So here we go, a little bit of on the left or on the right hand side. Don't know me right from my left. Just a little bit like that. Now I'm working outdoors, it's a damp atmosphere, so I should really wait till this dries before I paint in the mountains. But I'm going to show you how to cheat. So I'm going to put in the mountains. I'm going to put a bit of snow on the top. So I'm starting with a bit of cobalt blue and a little bit of alizarin crimson. And I'm just going to put a bit of colour, just flicking it up like that, look. Can't beat a good flick. A little bit of burnt sienna, not a lot. Just flick a bit of colour like that up. Now, I'm going to put the effective snow in the top now. So I'm just going to do a dot dash, dabba dabba do, like that, look. Now it's going to bleed into there, but I'm going to show you a little trick. Just get the shape of the mountain. Bit of Payne's grey, bit of alizarin crimson. I want a darker colour. It's bleeding into the sky because it's still wet. I need my rigger brush now to get some fine lines. Looks like we're going to get the company of the local geese. I can hear them in the field over on the right. Now, see how that's bleeding in there? I'm going to show you how you stop that. I want a bit of a tissue, and I'm going to put it to a nice tight wedge, and I'm going to go around here, look, and I'm going to press down there, and that will dry the paint and stop it bleeding, like that. It's just something you do when you're painting outdoors. You can't always wait for something drying. Right, let's carry on and put the effect of snow on the top. I want some darker colours. I'm using this Payne's grey blue with a little bit of a alizarin crimson in. Just touching it and twitching just to get the effect of some broken snow over the ridges. I'm just doing some dot dashes. Just twitch it down like that. A few more up there like that. And I'm going to put the tissue to a wedge. And I'm going to, because it's wet underneath, I'm going to take some colour out of there, like that. I've got a secret weapon I can use later. I'm going to show you lots of techniques in this series. All the techniques I've practiced over 30 years of painting. A little bit of burnt sienna with the mix, get a darker colour like that. I'll come back to this later. Let's just get a bit more there like that. Flick bits up like that, where the snow has drifted on the mountain top. And here, put a bit of shadow underneath there. A bit more colour like that. It's got to be built up sensitively. See how it's spreading the colour? But I'm just twitching with a nice soft sable synthetic brush. Alright, now behind here there's a little bit of the mountains going up like that. And again, just put a few little bits like that. Just flicking the brush down, look, just to get that broken effect. And we'll leave that for the moment. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to rough out this riverbank, and I'm going to use a large Hake brush for this, my sky and texture brush, because although it's wide, I've designed it to come to a chisel edge. Now, I'll put a little bit of raw sienna to start with a touch of sap green, and my arm's locked here, so I can draw perfectly nicely rigid. You can't paint flapping around like a budgie. If you want delicate work, you rest your arm on the paper. If you want finer work, you rest your hand. And if you want really delicate work, you use your 3 fingers and you've got total control. But I'm using broad sweeps here, so my arm's locked in here. So I'm just going along here, putting in the grass areas for the riverbank. Right. Now I need to add a little bit of Payne's grey now with a bit of burnt sienna. And here we are, we're going to go along here and edge the bank. Now it's still wet underneath, so I'm getting that nice bleeding effect, look. Now this is watercolour. You've always got to bear in mind that as it dries, you can lose 30% of your colour. So you must put your colour on just that little bit darker in tone. Right, now what I need to do is just twitch like that and blend those colours together, look. Can't beat a good twitch. Soften those colours like that. I'm going to work on this bank now. Bit of raw sienna, and here we go down here. Again, I'm using the large brush, look. Now when you're painting land, what the beginner does is they put the first coat on and let it dry, and then they put another layer on and let it dry. But that's not how the professional does it. What you do is you wet it first of all, and you do it like a sky. You do a wetting wet sky. So each successive layer you put on will soak in nicely, and you get that nice natural effect. I've added a bit of sap green now, so I'm just going across here, look, with this brush. I'm just having a good twitch like that. Here we'll fill that in. And then a bit of Payne's grey to the mix, and a bit of burnt sienna. And that will give us our darker line. We'll just have a little twitch like this. And then again we'll turn to the size 6 brush and we'll just blend them in like that, look, and you get this nice natural effect. Like you do a sky, it's wet in wet. So we'll let that dry. I'll need more detail later on, but you've got to wait for each stage in the painting drying. And when you're outdoors, it doesn't dry as quick as when you're indoors. So you've got to keep going back. Now there's a little bit of grass over here, in the top coming down, like that. Bit of raw sienna, a bit of sap green. There we are. There's a rough for our land area. Now I need to let this dry, and then I'm going to put it, oh, it's dried, I'm not too bad. So I'm going to put a bit of masking tape across there, just to control the flow of the paint. My masterclass is over there, can you hear him? He's obviously not impressed with my painting. I'm going to stretch that across there like that. And then I'm going to put in the tree structures, and that will prevent the paint from running down into my water. You don't always paint what you see. If you look at this scene behind, the trees on the right hand bank are the same tonal value as the trees on the left. But that's a 3-dimensional view, you look with your eyes. What I want to achieve in this paint is recession. I want you to look into the painting, and round the tree on the left I'm going to make darker, so your eye goes down and round this dark tree into the distance. I'm going to use my large stippler now to put in the trees. And I want a bluey, bit of blue, bit of raw sienna, and I'm going to put the background in. So basically, a bit more blue in the mix. just stippling in with this, my large stippler. It's ideal for trees and larger structures to save time. I'm mixing some cobalt blue with a bit of burnt sienna now. And as I come forward along this way, I will add the depth of colour, some darker colour. A bit more burnt sienna, a bit of raw sienna. I'm just creating the impression. In the time I've got, I can't paint everything in exact detail. Now what I want to, I'm creating an impression of the river. Burnt sienna, Payne's grey, as I come along. I want a dark background. A bit more raw sienna in. A bit of cadmium orange. I'm using cadmium orange for a change. There's just a whole bank of trees coming down to the water's edge here. Now there's a large tree comes under this peak here. And the trees are coming down like that in a I'm using this large brush for speed. I can cover large areas. I could use a sponge, of course. There's all sorts of techniques you can use. But this just does the job very quickly. Doing this darker now, look. If you look at the trees, they're coming down in an angle like this. They're giving us a bit of perspective. Bit of linear perspective. So we've got a rough background on there. Now I want some depth in these trees, and then we'll put the foliage on. So I want a bit of Payne's grey, a bit of burnt sienna, just a touch of red. And let's get some depth in here. I want a dark background to get the foliage in. Several ways you can do trees. You could apply masking fluid, which is just like a gum arabic, to preserve the whiteness of the paper and paint over the top and then remove it. But it's much easier the way that I'm doing it. Before the paint is dried, I'm going to scratch out with the knife. I'm going to put a bit of structure, look, tree structure. See what I've done there? I've just moved the paint to one side just to put an impression. So I'm putting in a bit, scratching a bit of tree structure while the paint is still wet. This Wonder knife's ideal for this. It's my specially shaped palette knife. Right, now let's have the tree on the left side put in. This has got to be darker. So Payne's grey, burnt sienna, and we've got these trees here. All I'm doing, look, is stippling. And there's a darker one behind that. Very dark at the bottom. Let's have a look at the shape of it. Bit darker, Payne's grey and burnt sienna. That's what I want. Get that depth. Again, we'll scratch out with the knife. And at the back here we've got a bit of tree structure. You're creating a painting. You don't have to copy it exactly, but you want the painting to be pleasing when it's finished. A few bits up there like that, a little bit coming out like that. Now I need to let that dry, and then we're going to put in the lights, the highlights on those trees. I'm going to remove the tape now, and we're going to put the groups of foliage on the trees. Take that off. I'm using one of my unique brushes for tree foliage, and I put a little bit of white acrylic out. White acrylic mixed with traditional watercolour will allow the paint to stay on the top, and that's what I want. I'm mixing a bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of sap green, a bit of white. I want to get recession. So these trees here, with a nice soft colour, I want to take your eye into the painting around the back of these darker trees. Just added a touch of cadmium orange to it. A little bit more cobalt blue. A little bit of raw sienna. Just stippling very, very gently. Now let's go. Bit of cadmium orange, bit of cadmium yellow, a little bit of that white. And let's make this a feature tree here. The paint's too wet, so I'm just wiping it on the tissue like that. Always got the tissue in my hand. Bit of colour in there. Bit of cadmium orange, bit of cadmium yellow, a little bit of white. I'll need to do this again. I'm just putting on a base colour underneath. All I'm doing is stippling. Anybody can stipple. More cadmium orange, more white, a touch of burnt sienna. Vary the colours of your trees. These are just autumn shades. No highlights on yet, we'll do that later. Just filling in. Bit of burnt sienna now to cadmium orange. Get a rich colour. Just dipping in some colour. Then we'll add the light highlights. Actually, the sun's coming out and it's drying nicely now. It's been a funny day, Been very damp. Just filling in those gaps there. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to do this specimen tree on the left. So I want some Payne's Grey, some burnt sienna. And I want this tree to be darker. So I'm putting on a dark background. Just put a little bit on the one behind, but I want that that's in the distance. A bit more Payne's Grey. I want it dark on this left hand side. Let's have a look at the height. That's about right. Right, I'm going to put the highlights on this tree on the left. Some white, some cadmium orange, and a little touch of raw sienna. Just touching it very lightly. Just added more cadmium orange to the mix. I'm keeping it dark. I'm just touching lightly, just to give the impression of foliage. See, I'm not trying to paint individual leaves. I just want that impression. Bit more cadmium yellow to white now. Just putting it on thinly, but the acrylic white, you see, will stay on the top, and that's what I want. If I'd used gouache, 50% would have soaked in, and 50% would have stayed on the top. But if I mix acrylic white, which is just another kind of watercolour, it'll stay on the top, and that's what I want. Right, I'm going to put some highlights in now. A bit of alizarin crimson with a bit of cadmium orange and a touch of white. And let's have a look. Let's make some of these. There we are. A bit more white, and I think I need a bit more cadmium yellow. I just mix the colours that I want. If it's not right, I add a different colour. I can't tell you exactly what colours. It's something you've got to experiment with. Colour mixing is an art on its own. Basically, it's just practice over the years. I mean, I just do it. It's something I can't tell you whether it's 20% of this, 30% of that. I just do it till I get the right tint. What you need to do is to buy a little book, a little watercolour book, and spend a few days mixing whole pages of oranges and reds and blues and greens. And then when you got the paint, you know exactly what colours to use. It's something that comes with experience, I'm afraid. You can teach the elements of colour mixing, but when you're actually mixing it, you can't stand here with a book in your hand. It's practice. That's the other thing you've got to learn. How wet the paint should be on the brush, and again that comes with experience, I'm afraid. More cadmium yellow, a bit more orange on this one, look. All I'm doing is stippling. I mean, I could have painted these just for a simple twitch, a simple wash, but it depends on your background. I grew up running through acres of forestry. I like trees to look like trees and not lollipops. If you want to paint lollipops, you paint lollipops. Everybody paints differently. It'd be a sad world if we didn't, wouldn't it? All I'm doing, I'm going along, mixing colours using cadmium orange, not a colour I use a lot, only when I'm doing autumn colours, alizarin crimson, raw sienna, burnt sienna, and of course a bit of white to lighten the colour. And I make no apologies for using white. Most artists use a bit of white. A few highlights now on the tops here. That's what I want, just a few highlights. I'm just adding more white to the mixes I've already got. Little highlights on here, just a few little bits here and there, look. Right, I'm going to switch, while I've got all the colours mixed, I'm going to switch to my other tree brush, my angle brush. See how it's cut at an angle? And using the mixes I've already got, I'm going to just stipple up down and down here. I'll get a bit of texture. This is a brush I use when I do bluebell woods and river banks and wildflowers and ivy up trees, and that's when I can get it to climb up the tree, of course. A bit of darker colour now, just to get that texture, something rough going on the grass there. I'm getting impatient, I'm dying to put that water in. But I don't know where I'm going to put the sharks, I haven't decided yet. So I'm just building up this grass area here. Just using the colours I've already got mixed. Wind's coming up again. One of the pleasures of painting outdoors. You don't know what the weather's going to be like in the next 10 minutes. What you can't do, of course, is change your painting to suit the weather conditions. You can look at water, 1 minute there's a nice white line across it, the wind comes, and the next minute it's gone all dark. So just create an impression, what inspired you to paint it in the first place. I've got a background on there, I'll put some highlights on later. I've got a bit of shingle coming out here, a few little pebbles. So I'm just using a little bit of water now, more water, and I'm going to the white acrylic, and I'm just going to put that little bit of shingle coming out there. There's a bit of light shingle coming out there. A little bit here around the edge. They're just small pebbles. And then I'm going to use the brush and I'm going to flick up here, and there's a few reeds and that in here. So I want some burnt sienna, a bit of Payne's grey, and I'm going to use the angle brush and I'm going to just flick up like that, look, to signify a few reeds. Only the brush is too dry. So I'm just putting these reeds in like this, a bit of Payne's grey. My brush is a bit too dry. That's it, that's it, that's it. Just flicking up with the angle brush to get these reeds and that. A bit more dark colour. There we are. Get the dark over the light. Gives it a bit of body. And again, I just play a pitter-pat underneath like that, just to link them to the ground. I need a little bit more white acrylic out. It's just another kind of watercolour. There's a lot of snobbery in painting, you know. Nearly as much as in wine. I always remembered a few years ago there was an international wine competition in London, and somebody put 2 cheap bottles of plunk in and it won. And art's like that. You do what suits you, not what somebody tells you you've got to do. There's no laws you've got to obey. Now I need some depth in these trees. And I want some depth. I'm just dabbing it on, look, dab, 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 dab. And I'm going to push it around. It's called scumbling. But you need depth in these trees. I want some depth in there. Everything you've got to link to the ground, whether it's a building, a tree, or... And trees, of course, are dark on the inside and light on the outside. The watercolourist tells you to paint light to dark. Silly when it comes to trees, isn't it? Because trees are dark on the inside and light on the outside. So it makes such a difference when you link your trees to the ground, get some dark in. Let's do a bit on this side. It's not too bad this side, but I need a little bit there. I won't use artistic license in a moment. Something I'm dying to do, which will make such a difference to the painting. Come to a 3/4 flat. There it is. And I'm just going to edge that riverbank again. Just going along like that. And a size 6 brush. This is my rigger brush, size 6 rigger. And I'm just going to twitch that up like that and blend that in. It's time to paint the water in now. I'm going to mix a bit of cobalt blue with a bit of sap green to start with. And I'm just going to go around here, look, and have a good wiggle. Now I want to darken underneath the shingle area here. A bit more cobalt blue. Just take that across like that, fill it in a bit. Rinse the brush, take off the surplus. Just working around this shingle. Now I want a bit of burnt sienna in. There's no particular pattern of flow. I want a bit of Payne's grey blue now to the mix. We've got company, a couple of Canada geese. I'm just darkening areas, look, underneath the trees. Payne's grey, burnt sienna. Bit of dark coming here following the flow of the water. Now I'm going to switch to a 3/4 flat. And I'm going to drag some of those colours down into the water. A bit of yellow there, look. Just take it down like that. Bit of yellow there. There's not much reflections today, but I'm creating a painting, so I'll just put some colours like that down. Bit of cadmium orange. Payne's grey and burnt sienna. Get the darker colours. And we'll get the brush and we'll just go across like that. Blend it in. I'm switching to a round brush. And I'm going to just have a good wiggle down here with some lighter colours. Just to get a bit of a flow pattern here. I'm adding a bit of white. Just to capture a bit of a flow pattern, like that. In fact, I'll switch to my size 6 rigger for this, I think. It's nice and soft. There's a few light bits underneath here, where the water's just curling round there like that. Bit of soft green, bit of yellow, a bit of white. We've got a nice soft area here like that. Oh, that's nice. That's what I want. Bit more white. This is called fiddling. Normally I look at a painting for a couple of weeks and make some changes. Something you can't teach, it's just something you do. That's why we're all different, and isn't that good? Right, I want a bit more Payne's grey and a bit of burnt sienna. I need to get this darker down here. Just putting ranges of Payne's grey and burnt sienna. I want to darken bits. Now, while I'm waiting for that drying, I want to put a few tree structures in. So I'm mixing some raw sienna with a little bit of acrylic white, and I'm going to put a few tree structures in there. Makes all the difference. The flies are biting well. They only go for bad meat, you know. These little bit of tree structures, the finishing things, make all the difference. That's better. Just a bit of raw sienna with a bit of acrylic. I'll put this back in again, I think. Make sure when you're doing your trees that your trunk is large enough to hold the boughs, that hold the branches, etc. It's these little bits of detail at the end that make or break a painting. So I'm just going around putting these little bits in. And I want to darken the edge here, look. where it hits the water. Just makes it stand out. Same here, look. Just soften it with a tissue. Always got it in your hand, you can adjust. Right, so I'm going to put a raw sienna wash over here. Always use the largest brush as possible in relation to what you're painting. So let's just take that down like that. And then I just put a little fence in and we're finished. Little fence works wonders. There's not a fence in the scene, but I'm putting it in now. Let's just have a bit of a few flow patterns from the water. This is the kind of thing I do as a quick sketch when I'm out, and when I'm back in the studio I can do a proper painting from photographs I've taken and this sketch I've done. I don't class these as proper paintings. But this sketch, what this series is about, is showing you lots of techniques. So hopefully I'll get you started painting and you'll be able to work along with me. Couple of bits in there, a few little dot dashes. You can easily overdo it. I'm going to put a few little bits of reflections of the branches down like that, look. I'm going to put a little fence. We don't want square fences. The farmer's just made these fences out of any old bits of wood that he's got out of the wood. And there we are. A couple of dots on there. This is a fiddling bit, but to me, you see, it's a fiddling that matters. That's why I spend a couple of weeks going around and making a few changes. Just scumble that in like that, look. I think it's time to put the mount round now. Well, there's our finished sketch. I've enjoyed painting that for you, but what have I done? I've taken an existing composition and I've turned it into an autumn scene. I could have just as well painted as a snow scene. This is something that I often do. Why don't you get out there and have a go? See you in the next programme. Happy painting. Hi, I'm Keith Fenwick. We're here today in my favourite part of the Lake District, in the valley of Borrowdale, and this is the hamlet of What Endleth, and this is the composition I've chosen to paint for you. So let's get painting. These are the colours I'll be using on all the paintings in this series. Leave a space between your paints, so when your brush goes into one colour, you don't catch the other colour. Just common sense painting. I've prepared a simple outline drawing of the scene we're going to paint, but the first thing we've got to do is to put in our sky. And today we've got a cumulus sky. So what I'm going to do is to use a little bit of cobalt blue and paint in the underpainting. Now there's a certain thing you've got to watch when you're painting a sky. You must never let the underpainting get too dry before you put in your clouds. But in this case it's quite a simple sky, but it's got to be done in 2 or 3 stages. So I'm using some light cobalt blue, just brushing it on very simple, just pretend you're painting the windowsill at home. It's as easy as that. Painting's not a gift, it's not inspiration, it's perspiration, lots of practice. Now it's not too blue, but I'm going to put just a few little bit more blue in here. A bit over here, look like that. A bit there. Take off the surplus with the brush. Very thirsty brush. And we're going to use a bit of tissue now, and we're going to put in some clouds. I'm not wiping, look, I'm just dabbing, going back to the white of the paper. But I want them to be the right shape. It's running down there, look, because I'm working vertical. So we take it off. Of course you'll be working at about 30 degrees at home, so you won't have this trouble. I'm not doing too many. Very, very simple. Another bit of tissue, and we'll take off that surplus, and I'm going to put just a little bit of shadow in those clouds. And we do that by simply wetting with a bit of clear water this area here, look. And we'll mix a little bit of Payne's grey with a bit of that blue, just a little touch of alizarin crimson, not a lot. I want to get a grey, and I'm just going to dab, look, do a dabba dabba do like that, look. Very simple. You can do a few at a time if you like, and we're just going to spread those around there just to get that little bit of shadow, give those clouds a little bit of body. I'm going to take the surface off the top there. It's a good blustery day today, but not a good drying day. Right, so I'm just dabbing a little bit out of there where it's running down again, and we'll put a little bit of shadow in this cloud here, but not too dark. Just a little. All we're doing is dabbing and pushing it around, look. It's soaking in nicely because I've wet the underneath of the paper. Put a little bit here, a bit more up there. There's not a lot, but we need something in there to give it a bit of body. A bit more there. And I think that's fine. Now the next thing we have to do is to put in our mountain. And we've got to achieve recession in this painting, so the mountain's got to be lighter in the background and darker as we come forward. But we can't put it in yet until the sky is dried. So we have to pause a moment till the sky is dry. But when you're painting outdoors, you've got to be adaptable. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this bit in here first. As long as it doesn't connect with the sky, it won't run. So I'm coming down to my round brush, and we're painting some sky. Some mountains rather, not sky. Bit of raw sienna. I always use a raw sienna as a basic underpainting. Then I'll drop other colours into it. There's little bits of green and so on I'm going to put in there. So I'll mix a little bit of sap green with a bit of cadmium yellow, and we'll just twitch up like that, look. What does it say? A twitching time saves 9? Something like that, isn't it? Only joking. I've got to entertain myself somehow, you know. I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna in. There's a variety of colours in there. All I'm doing at this stage is putting on the undercoat. So I'm just flicking up like that, look. Get a variety of colours in there. Again, drying the brush, taking off the surplus. Right, now, see how this is. That's not too bad now. So I can work back and put in the background mountains. Raw sienna again. I'll do this one over here. All I'm using the raw sienna for is to wet the paper. Right, now let's have a look. We've got a bit of green on the top there, so a bit of sap green with just a little bit of Payne's grey just to darken it a bit. And up here we've got that little peak, a little bit of green up here like that. A bit more cadmium yellow to lighten it. And a bit of Payne's grey to darken the bottom. There's a stone wall coming across there. I'm sure you've noticed that. And then I've got a few more peaks, which I'm going to use a bit of burnt sienna and a bit of Payne's grey. This is special Payne's grey. It's Payne's grey blue. So let's just put a bit of something like that. I'm just dabbing away, look, very simply. And then here we've got this big peak. This is the main feature on this. So I'm going to try and get the shape, something like coming down like that. Now see how it's bleeding into the sky? Because it's still wet. So I'll show you a little trick. I'm going to use a bit of tissue, put it to a wedge, and I'm going to press down there, and that'll get rid of those little bits that have bled into the sky. Easy as that. Right, let's put in some darker colour, Payne's grey burnt sienna again, and let's bring out this little crag up here. I'm just dabbing different colours on. Now that's bleeding there, look, so I'll do the same, look. Take it out, see how easy it is? And that's coming down in a little shape like that. Want a bit of sap green in, just to get some variety. Bits of green in here like that, bleeding across like that. And then I'm going to show you something interesting. I want a little bit dark on this side. There's various levels and crags jutting out as it comes down there. A bit darker at the bottom. Now I'm going to get rid of that bleeding here. This is one of the problems painting outside, but it doesn't dry that quick, and today is not a good drying day. So I'm wiping that off, look. Now I'm going to use a knife now, and I'm going to knife in some structure. All I'm doing is just like you do it every morning when you butter your toast. That's all I'm doing. I'm pushing the paint around. But don't tell yourself that you're painting a mountain. All you're doing is buttering your toast, so don't be frightened of it. A bit over there like that. A few little bits up there. So don't forget, all we're doing is putting on the undercoat. Now let's work on the other mountains on the other side. More raw sienna. You've got to determine how far across the painting you're going to go, how much you're going to put in your composition. You decide that before you start painting. Now, here I've got a little peak up here like that, and then I've got this bit coming up here. Another one going off like that. There's a bit of burnt sienna, Payne's grey, get a dark brown, put that in like that. I'm just touching and dabbing about, look, just to let the colour spread by capillary action. That's a big word, isn't it? I'm going to blend little bits down like that. Bit of green now, bit of cadmium. You can't compete with nature, just all we're doing is impression. Nature's too detailed for us to compete with. I'm using the knife now, Just put a few little marks in like that, not a lot. And I need, now this has dried a little bit, I'm just going to darken this side. The detail goes in later, the stone walls and that across here, but we'll put this in at a later stage. Right, now let's build up. I'll use a large brush. How about this one, eh? This is a whopper, isn't it? Everybody wants a nice point on a brush, but I tend to use a side. Always add a bit of raw sienna to your greens, it just softens it. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to build up the area of the mountain and put a bit of texture and tone in the mountain. Very important to get reality in your painting. The detail will come when I start putting in these rows of bushes. A bit more green in here, I think. I'm just using the side of the brush and twitching down like that. Now I'm going to let that dry now. So it's important that we let that dry, so we'll need a little break and then we'll continue. I'm going to put in the roofs of the buildings now, give the mountains a chance to dry. So I want a little bit of blue, the slaty grey, bit of cobalt blue, bit of Payne's grey, and I'm using the 3/4 flat. A little bit darker. Put the building behind there, it's at an angle. And it goes off like that to the peak. Bit of burnt sienna, bit of Payne's grey, get a dark grey to it. It's quite a damp day today. This is one of the problems painting outdoors, it doesn't dry. I'm going to work on the bridge now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a technical term now, so I don't want you to get worried. I'm going to splash it on all over. So I'm going to use some raw sienna, and I'm just dabbing it around like that, look. That's the undercoat. A little bit of burnt sienna now, but leave some of the underpainting showing through. I'm just splashing on all over, look. But I want a dark colour now, so I'm going to use a bit of Payne's grey and a bit of alizarin crimson. Gives a rich dark purple colour. I'm just going to wipe that down like that. We'll put the coping stones on. I'll use a rigger brush for that. Bit of burnt sienna, bit of alizarin crimson. And we'll just go over the bridge like that and put the outline of the bridge. These bridges can be found all over the Lake District. Very famous, these bridges. This one is particularly famous because in days gone by the merchants used to meet on bridges like this and distribute their loads and go off into different parts of Borrowdale, because we're in Borrowdale now, of course. Make sure you get the arch right. Now I'm going to get the knife now, but it should be a third dry before I do this. So I'm just going to put, all I'm doing, look, is moving paint just to put the coping stones on the top there. This is the special knife I've designed, and we're going to put in the arch of the bridge. All I'm doing, look, is moving the paint around. Very simple to do, easy. But make sure you keep the angles right. We'll add some detail later on. Now I'm going to put the small stones in, and I'm just going to use the corner of the knife. Here we go. There we are, look. See how easy that is? I'm just buttering my bread in the morning. You don't need 20 years experience to do that. Anybody can do this. Now, because the bridge isn't flat, the stones in the bridge aren't flat, I need to put some shadow underneath. Give it that three-dimensional look. But again, I need to let it dry a little bit. So I've come to the bigger brush now, and I'm going to mix a Payne's grey with a little bit of alizarin crimson, and that will give us a shadow colour. So we'll put some dark in here, look. Just gives it definition. Bit more red in. Just want to bring the detail out. Make sure the angles are right. And we'll do the same with the top, with the coping stones. Bit more definition. To paint with a brush is very difficult. With a knife, it's very, very easy. Now let's do the same with the stones. We want a little bit of shadow underneath some of these stones. You needn't do every one, but on two sides of the stones, we need a bit of shadow to give it that three-dimensional look. Don't worry if you put it on too dark. I put mine on a little bit dark. I've always got a tissue in my hand when I'm painting, so I shall soften it in a moment, but I want to get that three-dimensional effect. And don't forget, this is watercolour. When it dries, it can dry up to 1/3 lighter, so you must put the colour on darker to start with in a darker tone. Right, I'm going to put a bit of grass in here now. So I'm coming back to my large Hague brush, and I'm going to start by using a bit of raw sienna, and I'm going to just put in the grass area. I'm just giving other areas a chance to dry. Bit of raw sienna gives a warmth to the underpainting of your grass. And over here, the same. Having wet the underpainting, I'm just going to put a bit of soft green on there. I've used a bit of sap green with a bit of raw sienna. I'm using a bit of sap green with a bit of Payne's grey now, and I'm going to work around here looking at this dark. All I'm doing, look, is twitching. I get lots of twitches, you know. I'm just dabbing down like that, just to get a little bit of texture in the grass, look. And then I shall move this with the brush, with a smaller brush. I'll use a size 8 brush, and I'll just twitch that up like that, look, and spread that in Again, I'm just putting underpaint and I'll put texture in this with my special brushes at the end. Right, do the same with this side. Bit of grass here. Oh, the sun's coming out again. That's what I want. It'll dry quicker. There's a bit of grass going off here, and then there's a path. There's actually a gate over here, but we can't see the gate because there's a bush in front of it. Right, let's do some work on this building now. 3/4 flat again, and we'll put in the stone area first. So we'll start with some raw sienna. We'll do the gable end first. There's a pile of gravel or something there. Some burnt sienna. And again back to the Payne's grey and a bit of red to get that dark colour. So we'll just... Actually, it'll probably be better if I use the size 8 brush, because I just want it spread around. That's it, if I just do something like that, look. Just spread that around. A bit more burnt sienna. A bit more purple. And it's time to use a knife again to create our stonework on the gable end of the building. Now, you'll notice that all the stonework is just not quite horizontal. Just there's some large stones at the end, look. These are holding the building up. Large ones at the gable end there. Don't try and copy it exactly, you're creating an impression. Put some large stones in first. Go back the other way. And then we'll put the small stones in between, look. Make sure you don't make your stones too large. Everything's got to be to scale in proportion. There's long ones, there's short ones. This knife's very flexible. There we are. And now we've got the stonework coming down here we've got to put in. Raw sienna. And that's coming off like that. How far? I'm just checking how far it's going down. It's going down right to ground level. I thought there was a wall in front, but obviously there isn't. So our usual colours, raw sienna, bit of burnt sienna, when the paint is near finish, we'll go around and put lights and darks in. Sometimes I take a little pair of binoculars with me, because I can't tell whether it's a door or a window at distance, and they come in handy, but I haven't brought them today. A little bit of purple in here, just some variety. And it's back to the knife. Looks like we're being accompanied by the local cuckoo. It's the first one I've heard this year. Again, there's some larger stones there. Now these stones are going off at an angle. Perspective, in other words. Linear perspective. These are the little details you must take into account. Right, now let's put the roof of the building in. Put some of that colour over this side, just add a bit of variety. And there's a building behind there as well. I'm going to work on the white building now. I'm going to put the windows in the white building. And I'm going to use a rigger brush for this, just to shape it first of all. I'm using a Payne's Grey and Crimson mix. Never use black, it kills the painting. There's like a line of stones across there. The window here. It's important to get the positions of the windows right. So I'm painting in this other window there. Most of the windows here are going to be covered up with this foliage and some bushes across there. I'm going to put the shadows underneath the roof now. I'll just straighten the edge of that a bit. Under the eaves there's always this shadow effect. I'm using the same mix, a bit of Payne's Grey and a bit of alizarin crimson. I'm going to straighten this up here. A bit darker, I think. I'm going to build this background up now. I'm going to put some bushes on the mountainside. They've got to be done very, very simply, but they're necessary to put in to get that background effect. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to use some masking tape. This is just cheap masking tape you can buy in any do-it-yourself shop. And I'm going to stretch it down here, look. I'm going to follow the structure of this mountain. I'm going to bend it into that nice curve like that. And that will allow me to put trees down there and keep that line nice and definite. I'm using a size 8 brush, and I'm just going to start with a bit of sap green and a bit of Payne's Grey. Now let's have a look. Where does it start? We're starting somewhere like this. I'm just putting these on very simply. I'm just doing a dabba dabba do. Now if you look at the peak there, you follow down, the trees stop just under the centre of that peak. Now let's just, it'll need some light colour on here, but I'm putting the dark underpaint on first. As I go up the mountain they get higher, taller, but these have to be painted very, very simply. There's another one up here like that. And then we'll take that off. It won't tear the paper. It wouldn't dare. Now let's put the trees over this side in. Again, these want to be just a very soft green, no detail. So underneath this big peak here, there's a bank coming down there. You'll find you've got colour already on the palette, so you can go into that. It's called puddle painting. What you do is you go into that and you get this harmony of colour across your painting. It's the same colours you've used in other areas of your painting. I'm going to put that little stone bridge up. That little wall over there is a stone wall. So I'm going to put, that's coming from about here, underneath the peak there, and it's going across in a curve like that. A bit more burnt sienna. There's some shrubbery here. Just twitching up with a bit of darker colour there. A bit more yellow to the mix. And a bit of raw sienna underneath. So I'm just putting a variety of greens in here and raw siennas. And then we have another wall down here, which is coming from the top of the building. It's going over the top here, and down here, like that. And we've got a wall coming down here. The paint's still wet, so I will have to do this again. There's another little group of foliage here. There's a darker tree here. Some kind of spruce tree by the look of things. And then round here we've got this large group of trees. So I'm going to come to my special unique tree brush now, and I'm going to paint these in. Bit of raw sienna. All I'm doing is stippling. There's a group behind here, and of course there's this Scots pine I've got to put in. That's a feature. And while I'm at it, I'll put these little bushes in at the front. There's a group of bushes here, which are coming over the windows. I'm putting these on a little bit darker. Another one there, and then there's a big one coming up here, isn't there? There we are. I'm putting a little bit of dark in now to get the depth, and I'm going to put some light foliage on. The lights and darks are the most important element in a painting. There's a stone wall on this side and I need to put that in first. Then we'll put the bush along the riverbank. Bit of raw sienna. This is going to be hidden behind this bush I'm putting in. Well, most of it is. Yeah, in a darker colour. Payne's grey now red again. Put the coping stones on the top. And while I'm waiting for that drying, I should put in, with a very weak Payne's grey and just a touch of raw sienna, the path that comes along here. There's a path that's actually going up to a gate here. And while I'm at it, I'll add some darker areas around here. The water goes in last, of course. Oh dear, it started to rain. I'm just putting the coping stones in now, doing the wall. And then we'll put in these bushes. There's a bush here which is coming up. There's a couple of bushes which are actually blocking the gate. I've painted these scenes so many times now. I bet you tell you where every stone is. Dark again. I'm going to put in the large trees behind the buildings now. They're important, particularly the Scots pine. And what I'm going to do, so the foliage doesn't come over the buildings, the roof, I'm going to put a bit of tape across there. So here we go. Let's put those trees in. Raw sienna, sap green, bit of cadmium yellow. Let's start light. There's a large feature tree here. In fact, they're coming virtually all the way across there, aren't they? These are lighter here, look. And then we've got the larger ones here, like that. Some darker green, bit of Payne's grey. That's what I want. Get that depth. All I'm doing is stippling. I do that at school when they're 5-year-olds, so there's nothing to be frightened of. Trees are dark on the inside, aren't they? So I need to put a bit more depth in here. That's what I want. Look, that's it. Get that depth in your trees. Now let's put that Scots pine in. I'm using some Payne's grey with a bit of sap green. And here we are, here we go. Scots pine, it's in layers like that, look. We'll just use a rigger brush and we'll put in some structure for the trees. Oh, the sun's coming out again, that's lovely. It's always a worry when you're painting outdoors when it starts raining. We artists do suffer, you know, for our hobby. I need to put some light colour on these in a moment. Darken that down there. There's another bush in front of there which is lighter. And again, I'm going to scratch out with the knife for a bit of tree structure. Come on, sunshine, I want to dry. Take the tape off now. It's run down a bit, but not to worry. All we do is use a bit of tissue and wipe it off. There we are. Right, let's put some highlights in now. Now, to put the highlights on the foliage, I'm going to use a little bit of white acrylic. Gouache, if I use gouache, 50% will soak in, 50% will stay on the top, but acrylic stays on the top. Acrylic's just another kind of watercolours. So I'm going to put a little bit of that out. It's the only time I use white. I make no apologies for it. Turner used to put white oil paint on his watercolours. Peter de Winter, famous artist, used to paint on mustard coloured paper. Why do they make 3 whites if you're not supposed to use them? There's a lot of snobbery in painting. Not as much as wine, but nevertheless there's snobbery. Right, I'm going to just put some light foliage on these trees, look. A bit more cadmium yellow. To work on these trees here. Put a bit of foliage on here, look. All we're doing is stippling. Same with these. Very light. I'm not trying to paint individual leaves. What I'm doing is putting some groups of foliage on. While I'm at it, I shall put some texture on this riverbank, and then we'll start working on the water. Right, let's get the water in. If we look through the bridge, underneath of the bridge is a bit of land. So here we are, we've got a bit coming down here like this. See another little bit just through there. Bit of land down here. And there's some darker bits on to edge the bank here. Some darker bits like that coming into the bank. Shadows underneath the bank. Like that. Size 6 brush and we'll just twitch up. Then I'm coming to the 3/4 flat now. I'm going to put in a few rocks. Some rocks down here. A rock there. Just edge the bank a bit. There's a big rock here. A few rocks coming down there like that. Back to the knife. Putting the rocks down this side, then we put the water in. A rock there, one there, one there, one there, Big rocks there. It's time to put the water in now. That's done quite quickly. I'm using some cobalt blue. Leaving little bits of the white paper showing through. Now we need more of the Payne's grey blue because it's dark over this side. It's running quite a lot because it's quite a damp atmosphere that we're working in. A bit of burnt sienna to the Payne's grey will give us a dark, rich colour. It's quite dark around here, that's what I want. It's darker here under the bridge, and there's some dark shadow from the bridge underneath here, look. Using a small brush now, I'm going to just twitch that across, take a little bit out there. And using a wedge, I'm going to put a few little highlights in. Just take it off like that, look. I'm going to paint in this pile of shingle on this side. There's a little path there as well which we need to put in. It just seems to link the ties of building to the ground. A bit more Payne's grey, and there's a darker top to it. We'll just spread that down. It's just a pile of gravel. There's actually a path coming across here. I'm going to just soften that gravel by, there we are, look, wiping the colour off like that. I'm just turning the tissue to a point. I'm going to soften a bit like that. Let's work on this area here now. I'm going to use my special angled brush, and I'm going to add some texture, a bit of rough grass. So I'm just using a bit of green, and then all I'm doing, look, is stippling down like that. Put it on very quickly. Bit of darker colour. Then we'll refine it. Always follow the fall of the land. This is the kind of thing I do as a quick sketch when I'm out painting. I'm just going to put some lighter colour over here. Behind here I've got a tree. Over this side here, I've got to put that in now. putting it in dark to start with. Bush there. While I've got some dark colour on here, I'll just add a little bit of dark here and a bit of dark at the bottom here. And then using a size 8 brush, just blend that in like that. You've got to get that dark in the trees. Just blend it in like that. Have a good wiggle. Want some dark at the base here. Whether it's a building, a tree, you've got to link it to the ground. So we just dabba dabba do there, look. Doing lots of dabba dabba doos, you know. And now it's a good idea to stand back and have a look and see what we've missed out. Yes. So up here, look, we're going to put a fir tree in. All you do is you rock like that, look, and under your breath you sing rockabye baby. That's too dark, take it out. There we are. Just come down like that. I'm putting some detail on the roof now, just a few minor lines across, just to give a bit more definition, look, for the layers of the slates. These are typical Lakeland slates that come from the local quarries. And we're just doing a few little dashes like that, look, very simple, just to show the lie of the tiles. Needn't do them all, just a few here and there. A few highlights, a few stones in there. In the bridge, make the bridge glow a bit more. And you know the important thing I haven't done, you didn't tell me, did you? Is I haven't put the shadow under the arch. I can't see too much of it here, but basically what we've got there's our arch like that. But I can see a little bit of it coming down here like this. Never look straight on a bridge. It's very important to get that bit there. It makes all the difference to your bridge. Now one thing I didn't show you, these are sticks of watercolour. They're amazing things. What I'm going to do is dip that in the water and get it wet. We'll just put a few bits in here, look, just to show you what I mean. Just a few highlights here and there. Well, I think we'll call that a day. All we need to do now is put the mount round and have a look at it. So here's our finished painting. I certainly enjoyed painting it for you. I hope you enjoyed watching me. So why not get out there and have a go yourself? See you soon. Hi, I'm Keith Fenwick. We're at Blake Hills Farm today in Cumbria. We've got a wonderful composition to paint. It's a typical Lakeland farmhouse. We've got the white frontage and the stone outbuildings. But I'm going to do it different today. I'm going to treat it as a winter scene. So let's start painting. These are the colours I'll be using on all the paintings in this series. Leave a space between your paints. So when your brush goes into one colour, you don't catch the other colour. Just common sense painting. So the first thing we're going to do is to put in the sky. I want a bit of tissue in my hand to control the wetness of the paint, and we're going to do what's called a wet in wet sky. So I'm using my sky and texture brush, and I'm going to wet it with just a little bit of raw sienna, not a lot. Now I never put the brush into the middle of the paint. I draw duck eggs touching the deposit of paint, and that determines the strength of pigment that I draw away. There we are. I don't stretch paper. I never stretched paper for 25 years. I find it still goes wet and moves once I put paint on, so I don't see any point in stretching paper. This is 240 pound paper, so it's quite nice thick paper. So I'm going to put the skies in now, but I'm going to put my own sky in. So I'm just brushing, look, very lightly, a bit of colour across here. That's it, look. I don't want it too dark on this one. I'll put some colour across here like that. A little twitch here and there. Nice simple sky. There's my underpainting. And that's it, that's what I want. Beautiful, look at that. And then we'll use a little tissue just to put in a few clouds, look. Now I'm just dabbing, I'm twisting. I'm not moving it like that, look, I'm just touching the paint, soaking it up, putting a few little clouds in. Sky is very important to me, it can be 2/3 of your painting. Not in this case, but in most paintings it takes up quite a lot of the area. Across there like that. A little bit of on the left or on the right hand side. Unfortunately, what I was worrying about, the hazard of any watercolour is it started raining. But it's given me an interesting effect in the sky. I've got snowflakes in the sky now, but I can't progress painting the mountain until it's dried. So I'm going to go further down. I'm going to put it in the roof of the building. I'll mix a bit of Payne's grey with a bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm just putting in the roof like that. There'll be trees over this bit. I'm using a nice rough paper. Always use a nice rough paper, so I get this broken effect on the roof. There's the roof of our building. We've got over this side, I'm mixing a bit of Payne's grey blue with a bit of alizarin. Gives a typical Lakeland slate grey. I'm using a size 6 rigger brush. And we've got the roof of the old barn here. Take off the surplus. Right. We'll put in this building here on the left, the storeroom. It's just a very light grey. Not quite white. And the walls, I'm adding a bit of raw sienna to the mix. It's just plaster. And we'll put in the green doors to the barn. Bit of sap green. I prefer red doors myself in a painting, but this green will look quite nice. Like that. I'll paint in using a bit of Payne's grey and a bit of alizarin crimson. While I'm waiting in this drying, I shall put in the inside of the barn, looking into the dark atmosphere inside. It's coming down to ground level. Leaving a few bits of white paper showing through, just to make the viewer think there's odd things in the barn there. Now, how's this doing? Right, I think I can put the mountain in now. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put the building in. I'll put the windows in. in the, never use black. I'm using a bit of Payne's grey, a bit of blue and a bit of red, alizarin crimson. And we'll put these windows in. When you're working in a damp atmosphere, you've got to work around different areas of the painting. A bit more red. Yes, it just doesn't dry as quickly as you want, and it's not a good drying day today. In fact, it's a very bad drying day. There's a window over here. I'm not worrying about the framework of the windows. We'll put that in a moment. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of red now, a bit of burnt sienna, and I'm just going to dab some darker colour in, look. Just dab it in, and then I'm going to turn the tissue around to a point, and I'm just going to add some little light bits like that, where the light's hitting the glass. Simple as that. Now we'll do the windows below, same procedure. There's a window down here. For some reason I forgot to draw that in. And there's one here in front of the wall. There's a door frame there, and it's a brown colour, so a bit of burnt sienna, but it's in shadow. So basically in here we've got a brown door frame. Now let's see where. I think I can put the mountain in now. We're going to put some snow. It's not a very attractive shaped mountain, so a bit of snow will work wonders. I'm starting with a bit of cobalt blue, and I'm going to just twitch up like that, some bits like that, look. There's trees in front of most of it. Just getting a broken wash. You're not going to see much of this, there's trees behind it, but we'll just have a few broken bits like that. Shadow on the mountain. A little bit darker. Payne's grey, a little bit of red. And we'll just pick out a few little bits of peaks on the top. Rinse the brush and just twitch them down to get a broken effect, look. Like that. Few dot dashes. There's trees covering most of this. Then rinse the brush and just twitch down, quick twitches, look, and you get that broken effect at the top. Few darker bits, Payne's grey red, a bit darker, just to pick out the few odd peaks at the top, projecting through the snow. Like that. I'm going to put the effective snow in the top now. So I'm just going to do a dud dash, dabba dabba do like that, look. Just get the shape of the mountain. Right, let's carry on and put the effective snow on the top. I want some darker colours. Just putting a few dark bits, that makes the effective snow stand out more significantly. So a few dark bits at the top like that, a few little dot dashes, look. Not a lot, just signifies there's some rocky outcrop coming through the snow, but we don't want to overdo it. I'm going to use a tissue in a moment just to soften the edge of the ridge. Right, I need a tissue now, and I'm going to put the tissue to a wedge a nice tight wedge. I'm saying tissue, you know, I'm being polite, it's a bit of toilet roll. But I put it to a nice tight wedge, and I'm going to just break that ridge by taking some of the paint off. That's one advantage of a damp atmosphere. The paint isn't drying when I don't want it to dry. I'm reasonably happy with that. Right, what do we do now? Let's have a look at this stone wall in front of the building. There's a stone wall going right across there, so I want a bit of burnt sienna, a bit of raw sienna to start with, and the wall is coming. Let's have a look where the green door is. There's a tree next to it there. There's some stonework down here on the building. There's stonework across there. Stone on the other side. And the stonework across there. I'm going to use a Wonder knife, special shaped palette knife of mine, just to put in a hint of some stones. It should be a third dry, but I'm not going to get away with that today. I don't think it's too damp, the atmosphere. I'll put a few marks in, look, but I'll have to highlight them probably with a bit of white acrylic or something. See how it goes. I want the shadow above the green door, so I'm using a bit of Payne's grey, again with a bit of alizarin crimson, and there's a dark area here, just looking into the barn. I'll just darken this again, it's gone light with the rain. It's level across the top of the door. And I saw a window I'd missed out. That's right, there's a window over here, look. Just take this surplus off. It's steady drizzle, I'm afraid, but we'll see how far we can get with it. Now let's have a look. Around the windows, I need to come to a small rigger now. This one will do. I need a bit of cobalt blue, because the window frames, not the wooden ones, the cement round the windows is painted blue. So let's put that in. It'll dry much lighter. Over this side. That's another window I've missed out. I better put that in. There's a window down here. It's a funny when I've drawn it, I've missed two windows out. Must be the pressure we artists work under, you know. And there's the windows here, look. A bit more red in it, a bit more water. Like that. I'm going to paint in the stone wall now, going right across the front of the building. Not forgetting to leave the areas for the gates into the two farm cottages. So So let's have a look. It starts over here, just past the green door. It's about here. So put that in like that. I'm using a bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna mix. And then it's coming right across here. I've missed out a gate somewhere. Ah, the gate's down here, look. At the end of this building. I'll just take it out with the tissue, no trouble. Gosh, we artists are adaptable, aren't we? There we are. And then we're going to well, there's actually another stone wall behind here into these fields, and then we've got a fence. Right, a bit more, a bit of Payne's grey and a bit of burnt sienna, just to get a darker bit in. Just adding a variety of colour in this wall, just to signify some stonework. One of the hazards you'll find when you're painting outdoors in a damp atmosphere, that your paint runs all over the way, and that's not what you want. But I'm sure I shall cope. This colour's not right, and it certainly weakens the colour when it dries, so maybe it have to be done twice. I just put a variety of colour in there. The coping stones. There's a wall in the distance there. Bit of raw sienna and burnt sienna. Let's just see if the knife will work. It may be too damp. Should always be a third dry, but we'll see what happens. Oh, it's not too bad. I'm going to put the coping stones on first, just using the point of the knife. Sounds silly, but this knife has changed my life. I can do things I couldn't do before. Right, I'm going to put the trees in now. So I'm going to use one of my special tree brushes, the round-ended one, the Derwent water. I always have tissue in my hand to control the wetness or dryness of the paint. And we're going to put the trees in. But I need a bit of masking tape to put across the roofs of the building. So I'm going to stretch it across the top of the roofs like that. So when I paint the trees in, I won't come across the roof. Another bit over here. Like that. Just press it down at the top. Right, let's put the trees in. Now these are going to be painted, this is going to be a winter scene. I'm going to paint them dark autumn colours and then put snow on. So let's start with a bit of burnt sienna, a bit of Payne's grey, and let's have a look at the shape of the trees. Now the view, of course, the leaves aren't on because we're painting in May, but I'm going to create my own because I've painted it several times, so I know exactly what the trees look like. Bit more Payne's grey to the burnt sienna. That's what I want. I don't want to miss, there's a chimney there. Now this is actually a large tree, a specimen tree here, which is in front of the others, so I'll leave that to last. We'll go along here and put some trees in. All I'm doing is stippling. Must miss these chimneys out. The trees are actually going right across to the edge of this building. They're going up like that. And then we've got a high one which actually comes, well, there's a tree coming up past this chimney here, which is a good height. I'll work around that in a moment because there's a chimney there. And then we've got a high one up here. Just coming right up there like that. Right, let's darken bits. I use a bit of cadmium orange now, with a bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to put in this specimen tree which comes down to the wall. It's actually coming over this window, isn't it? So it's actually over here. I'll do this one dark and then it'll stand out. In fact, I'm going to put the trunk in first, then I know where I'm going. And the trunk is coming just past this window here. It's on the other side of the wall. It's going up like that. I will leave that to last because I need to take the tape off. So let's put the dark around here. Darker one up here. Very tedious trees are, but they've got to be done properly. Just softening the edges now and give them a bit of shape. I want to darken it over the top of the tape. Now there's a very large tree behind here, isn't there? In fact, it's the tallest of them all. And it's going right past the end of this building, behind here. I'm doing it dark, but I'll put the snow on some lighter foliage on in a moment. I'm just going to create a bit of structure with the knife. All I'm doing, look, is pushing the paint to one side. I know this is the most difficult one. Take the tape off. I'll just level that off at the bottom. We'll take it off like that. See the sticky tape I put on, the masking tape, because of the dampness, hasn't adhered to the surface, but we'll take it out like that, look. I'm just going to level that off now. Fill that in around the chimney. While I'm at it, I should put a shadow underneath the eaves. These little details are so important. That. Right, I'm going to put this specimen tree in now. I'm going to do it dark because it's in the foreground. Let's get the shape right. It's quite a whopper, this one. I'm doing it dark so I can see exactly when I put the highlights on what the shape of this tree will be. And I must make sure the trunk is in the middle. And how far is it coming across? Coming down here, trailing across there. There's bits trailing down here and like that. Scratch out with a knife, a few little branches and so on. Right, while that's drying, I can work on this side. There's some more trees over there. So there's some trees over here I'll put in, but I need a bit of background first. So I'll just use a little bit of raw sienna across here behind in the background. And then we'll put in these trees on the far side of the wall. At the moment all the trees are dark, but you'll soon see what I do with them. So I've got a large tree here, and it's just coming across the front of the building like that. And that's coming right down to the level of the wall. There's another one here. Something up here like that. Right, let's put a few highlights on these trees. At the moment, they look horrible. So, a bit of raw sienna. Now this is where I'm going to use a bit of acrylic white. I just want to lighten aspects of it. So let's go around these. And I don't use it very often, but it's ideal for foliage and for snow. But I want a bit of background before I put the white of the snow on. I'm going to call this one First Snow, I think. I want to signify there's some variety of colour in the foliage before I put the snow on. Just a fine drizzle. It's creating an interesting effect on the painting. I've got a lovely snow-filled sky now. Cadmium orange, burnt sienna, a bit of white. Just fill this in here. That's nice. Just adding some hint of foliage on these trees and we'll put the snow in, but I need to be perfectly dry before we put the snow in. Just creating a background for the snow to go on. There's a big tree in front of all the other trees at the front of the house, so I need this to stand out more. So I'm going to do that by putting some lighter foliage on. Right, now we're going to put the snow on. So I want some nice crisp white. I'm rinsing the brush. And I want some nice crisp white. I'm not putting it on thick. So I'm taking the surplus off on the tissue. So let's go around now and get the effect of snow. I'm touching very lightly with the brush just to deposit little bits of snow. See the idea? I'm not trying to paint individual leaves, I'm just trying to paint clusters of leaves where the snow has landed. This is where acrylic white comes in very useful. You could use gouache, but the trouble with gouache is 50% will soak in and you'll lose that sharpness. And I want it to stand out on the top. There's our snow. Whew, I wouldn't like to be out in this weather. It's bad enough it is to rain. Let's do this behind here. Just softening the tops. There we are, the snow's going on there. Now there's some bushes here. We'll put quite a bit of snow on this bush. The underpainting should be perfectly dry when you do this, but we're not going to get that today. It's too damp. So I'm not going to get that crispness. What I'll do when I go home is I'll touch it up and get that crispness that I need. Right, let's put a bit on here. Then the main tree in front of the building will make distinctive. Right, here we go, this is the one. I'm leaving the light yellow showing through. A little bit of white down the trunk there. It's drizzling quite heavy now and it's washing out the roof of the building. So what I'm going to have to do is to do it again. Put a bit more colour in there. There's some chimneys in there and I'm going to put those in with a bit of burnt sienna because they are bricks and I want them to stand out. So we've got a chimney up here like this. I've got another one. Oh, you can't see that one, but you can see this one over here. A little bit darker on the side. There's a little bit of I should just wash out this bit here. Easily done, look, simple stroke. And then we'll put the chimney pot on. These are not good painting conditions, guys. I'm going to paint the arches now to the entrance to the buildings. So I want a dark area around here. Like that. I'm using a bit of Payne's grey blue around here. Got the dark doorway in there. Got a little frame around the top here. Shadow around there. Got a little gate in here. a little gate here. I just want to indicate the walls of the archway. See, I've missed out a bit of cobalt blue around this window. And around here. Right, I'm going to work on this foreground now. There's a path first of all. I'm going to come to a 3/4 flat. And it's basically a bit of tarmac, shingle and so on. So I want a bit of red. There's a path here. I'm just going to put this, all I'm having is a good wiggle. Look, this is a path going up to the farmhouse. There's a bit of going into the yard here. A little bit of red in, more alizarin crimson. Just have a good wiggle around here. A bit of burnt sienna, bit of Payne's grey, just to have a little bit of edging here. More Payne's grey. Only a mad Englishman would paint out in weather like this. Right, let's get the round brush now and put this snow in the foreground. Bit of blue, work back from there. Payne's grey, cadmium blue and a bit of red. Probably best doing it with a larger brush, in fact the hake. I'll put some tufts of grass coming through by just twitching. I'll just wipe that out with a tissue or put it on a bit heavy. Soften that like that. And then I'm going to use a bit of Payne's grey, bit of burnt sienna. And I'm going to just twitch, look. Just to signify a bit of stubble coming through the snow. There's actually daffodils and all sorts growing on this bit of lawn. Bit down here. I'm calling this one first snow. The snow isn't very thick, so the stubble growing through. I'm just going to edge the top there. I'm going to edge the path where it goes into the field. I'm going to just edge the area around the path there and round the back on the far side of the path. Right, I'm going to get a brush, the round one, burnt sienna. I'm going to fan the end like that, look. And I'm going to just twitch and blend these up to signify tufts of grass, stubble. Not too high, mind. A quick twitch here and there just to signify some stubble coming through there. A few little bits of pitter pat across here, a few bits of stubble up there. Look, I'm just spreading the paint up. It's still wet, a bit round like that, and over here. Let's put this fence in now. Payne's grey, burnt sienna. There's a fence all the way up here. Let's have a look, start over here. And we've got this fence coming up here. Don't paint the fence posts perfectly straight. Not in a painting, they're not anyway here. Sheep have had a good scratch next to them, I think. And we've got a fence going right across here, from here, in front of this wall in the distance here. We've got a gate here. And we've got an odd bit of fences over here which I can't quite make out. And over this side we've got a whole range of fences down here. Just in front of here there's the going around the bottom of that wall, adding a bit of definition around the bottom of the wall. Now what I do need to do is use a little bit of white acrylic to put in the white window frames. I need to get this to a nice point. I'm going to keep them simple. Go across now. You could have masked these windows out, but it's much easier to put them in with a bit of white acrylic. I want a bit of shadow underneath the eaves of this building here, the barn. Same with this outhouse. Normally I would draw this wire along the fencing with a pen. It's easy to draw it in with a liner pen, but I'll just give an impression of it. I'll just flatten my rigger. See if I can get a nice sharp line. I'm just putting a few dark bits in the path, because again it's all washed out. That's the trouble when you're painting in the rain. You think you've got the colour on, and when it dries, it vanishes. Just using a fine rigger, keep your wrist parallel, keep it horizontal. You draw straight lines with your arm, not your wrist, curved lines with your wrist. I'm just putting a few lines in to show that the roof is tiled. Right, it's time for the sheep. And all we do for sheep is we paint horseshoes. You didn't know that, did you? We're going to put some horseshoes in. There's one horseshoe. There's another horseshoe. Don't make them equally spaced. Don't put them in lines. Bad design if you do. A few in the field over there. I'll have one down there, one next to it. We'll have one. I'm taking care not to put them directly under each other. They're in a line there, look. So I'll change that by putting another one there. These are principles of design. There we are, look. That sheep's looking to the right, look. You extend the horseshoe. That one's to the left. That one's the rear end. That one's looking to the right. That one's looking to the right. That one's looking to the left. I'm just extending the horseshoe, look. That's looking to the left. That's to the right. Now, the shadow is very important. Legs are optional. If they're in snow, long grass, you won't see the legs. But there's one in each corner, I'm told. The shadow underneath is very important. Just a little detail, but whatever you do, you must link it to the ground. Now, at the moment, they're bumping into everything because I haven't got a head on. So we're going to put a little triangle for the head. So that one was looking to the left. Triangle for the head. I think that was a local buffalo. Triangle for the head there. Triangle for the head there. Bit more Payne's grey. These are Scottish Blackface or Swaledale. They look just about the same. And don't worry, I'm going to make them into white sheep. Well, I'm not going to make them white actually, because it's in snow. I'm going to add a bit of raw sienna to the coat. Now what I'm going to do is to put a bit of white on. This is where a bit of white acrylic comes into its own. I'm going to mix it with a bit of raw sienna, because this is the white of the paper that I've left through. I've left the white of the paper for the buildings just as well. So let's do these sheep. I'm just quick twitches from the back down. Make sure the heads are joined on or they get very upset. When you get to the rear end, go the other direction. Bit of raw sienna in the mix. Of course, these are Scottish Blackface. The Herdwick sheep that you have in the lakes, you've basically got three breeds. You've got Swaledale, Scottish Blackface, and you've got the Herdwicks, which are a much rougher coat, and they tend to have a purple tint to them. When you see the black lambs, they're the Herdwicks, because they're about 9 to 10 months before they start going white. Right, now I need to go again with a little bit there, a little bit of raw sienna, look, and white. There we are, makes them stand out in the snow. I'm going to give the sheep a bit of body now by just adding a little bit of Payne's Grey and Red underneath like that. Again, this should be done when the paint is perfectly dry. And all I need to do now is put the mark on the back, a little bit of red, and there's our sheep, easy as that. I'm going to signify a bit of life in the painting apart from the sheep. I'm going to do that by putting some smoke coming out of the chimney. That signifies there's somebody in the house. So all I'm doing is using a little bit of white acrylic, and I'm going to have a wiggle. I need a bit of sharp white. This is titanium white, by the way. There are 3 kinds of white, but the titanium white is the one that you use. Flake white is not the one to buy. So here we are, look, I'm just signifying a bit of smoke coming out of that chimney. I'm just going to add a darker tone to the base of the trees now, just to give it that 3-dimensional effect. So I'm using a bit of Payne's Grey Blue with a bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm just going to darken the bits around here, over the roof where I want to emphasise the trees hitting the roof. I want a darker background to it. So I'm just putting it in like that, look, and I'm going to push it around. I'm going to have a good wiggle. This is just scumbling. Just pushing it around like that. I need some depth. That's better. And I want some depth in this tree on the right. That's what I want. Let's get something in here like this, look. Just push it around with this soft brush. This is a Sable synthetic brush, size 6 rigid I have. Just to get some definition in there. And under the tree here, this is a shadow you get under a tree. I want a little bit here, look, a bit of darker in here. It's these little finishing bits that make the painting. Well, I think we'll call that a day. I think I've got everything in there. I'm sure I've missed something. Yes, I'm reasonably happy with that. Let's put the mount round now. One of the perils of the watercolourist is painting in the rain, and it certainly caused me problems today. Because the surface is being wet with the rain coming down, when I put the paint on, I've lost the dark values, so I've had to go over it again and increase the tonal values. But I've also had a happy accident. For example, the sky here has got wet, and I've got a wonderful effect of snow that I hadn't planned for. What I could have done, of course, I could have wet it and sprinkled salt over it, and that would have given the same effect. I've also put some sheep in the foreground. It's essential to have something in the foreground to make the painting. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me do that. See you soon.